Okay, so the first question, um, at the beginning of a Buddhist meditation practice, I recite the refuge prayer, and this is from Bruce. So it is very meaningful to me. Can you please share your insight into this prayer? And the prayer goes like this: In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. By virtue of giving and the like, I shall reach Buddhahood to aid all beings.
So, yeah, these prayers are quite beautiful. As you know, Bruce, I've had the opportunity to attend some of Rinpoche's talks, and this practice of prayers before and prayers after, both of setting one's aspirations and one's intentions and of dedicating practice, um, I find quite beautiful and quite like an integral part of practice. When I trained in Aikido, there's all kinds of ritual involved.
Hmm.
Bowing before practice, bowing after practice, bowing to your partners that you're going to train with. All these things become kind of an integral part of practice. And this kind of prayer, like taking refuge and setting one's intentions or aspirations uh, on giving, reaching enlightenment, and aiding all beings is a wonderful way to begin practice. And in general, I think in practice, it's a good idea to ask yourself and remind yourself what you're doing, uh, what you're doing in your practice, and why you're doing it, and to set your intentions on the highest imaginable goal. And uh, aside from that, I'll say, taking refuge is like a kind of faith. It's a way of trusting in a higher power and of having love for that higher power. And that really is the heart of prayer itself. So, um, the only higher prayer really is union with the higher power, and that's enlightenment itself. So, yeah, this is a wonderful practice.
Hmm. So, what are we taking refuge from?
Your delusions and suffering, really. Yeah. Your confusion, your anger, your um, your ego, really.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this, because it's you start there and you have to recognize, the state of, I guess, samsara, uh, and as you say, the intentions or the hopes to awaken from that, and not only for one's own personal gain, but really for as avenue to help other people perhaps also reach that state.
Yeah. Well, and that in and of itself is practice. Even just having aspirations of selflessness, of helping others, is in and of itself spiritual practice
Mm.
because uh, it helps to move you toward selflessness, toward an experience of selflessness, and toward insight into selflessness, and so on. So, yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question?
I
I've
do, Bruce.
go
Um,
for it.
so, the concept of helping others, right? So, one way I sometimes think of it is yes, we try to help others, and yet, is there really any way we could help others?
Yeah, that's a deeper question. That's why I said it's a practice. Ultimately, as I was saying to you, Bruce, yesterday, there's no problem. But the way everything works also involves people helping other people. And that's a part of what's going on. So, you have to wrap that into the equation. So, on the one hand, no, there's no way we can help others. On the other hand, it's happening all the time. People helping other people. And so, in that sense, it's good practice to set one's intentions and one's aspirations to do that.
You contradicted yourself there, Matthew. No, you
To,
can't help
to,
everyone. Everyone is always helping other people.
to quote Walt Whitman, did I contradict myself? Fine, I contradict myself. I'm large, I contain multitudes.
Oh, Walker, you like that one, I guess. Okay. Any other follow-up questions, or we're going to go to the next one? All right. I don't really understand prayer and how to get the most from a prayer. It seems like praying for a specific benefit for myself or others has an ego-driven component. Can you please explain your understanding of prayer? How do you pray now? And maybe we'll stop there, because when you and I walked a week ago, your description of prayer was the most beautiful, relevant description I've heard of. And then I'm going to read the Lord's Prayer, and you can just comment on that one.
Yeah. Well, most people have probably heard the Lord's Prayer. I think it's the first prayer I learned, so I know it quite well. I also puzzled over prayer for a long time in my life, and I think probably most people do. So let's talk about prayer in general, as that's really the most important part of the question. And that will hopefully help us understand the Lord's Prayer in some respect. So prayer can be thought of, oh boy, sorry. Hopefully that won't happen again. Prayer can be thought of as an aid in the process of seeking God. There's a few different levels or layers to it as I see it. And even a single prayer could be practiced on all of these different levels, all of these different layers as one progresses on one's own journey or one's path. And the first layer of prayer is just acknowledging a higher power, that which is greater than oneself, one's ego, or one's conception. That's just the first layer. And all acknowledgement of a higher power is essentially prayer. And our first instinct, of course, is to ask this higher power for what we want or what we want for others. But that's just the most basic level. And as the question states, it's still quite ego driven, tainted by a kind of selfishness. Give me what I want, or what I want for other people, even if the desires are altruistic. There's still one's own desires. And the next layer is trusting the higher power. So not just acknowledging, but having a kind of faith or a kind of trust in that higher power. So you see how that moves on from the first layer, right? Now I don't need to ask for what I want because I trust that the higher power knows what I need, and that what I need is more important than what I want. So you see, like, for example, in the Lord's Prayer, not my will, but yours be done. Yeah. So in some way, the trust is still kind of conceptual. We concede in our mind that we're limited and admit that this higher power knows better than us what's good for us. But at the same time, this kind of trust, this faith begins to move beyond conception. So the next layer, again, in prayer, is loving the higher power. And this kind of falling in love or this adoration of the higher power moves us even further away from the ego and from conceptualization. So as that love grows, the ego dissolves. The higher power gets bigger and bigger, more and more significant, while the individual self gets smaller and smaller, less and less significant, until that higher power encompasses everything. And so the final prayer is one of silence of the individual ego, because now only this higher power remains. And so, in the Western traditions, this kind of is referred to as union with God, or apotheosis, or perfection, and so on. So, the Lord's Prayer, you can see really all these different layers. Encompassed within it. And remember, in the Gospels, Jesus gives the Lord's Prayer as a kind of like, basic teaching. One of the disciples asks him, how should we pray? And he says, okay, well, here's some words to say and to live by. It's really, if you take it at face value, it's just a place to start. But, all practices, even the most simple practices or the most simple prayers, contain the whole teaching. If you just keep following this practice and through all those different layers, then this one prayer can contain everything. So from the simple acknowledgement of the Our Father in the Lord's Prayer, to the trust of Thy will be done, from the love inherent in forgiveness, to the deliverance of evil, which really is nothing other than that which holds us apart from the higher power. In other words, a deliverance from our delusion and suffering. It's all there. So I would say, to make the most of this prayer, keep or any prayer, keep this trajectory in mind: acknowledgement, trust, love, and union, and the dissolution of the individual self. In the end, really, the particular words are somewhat irrelevant, and whether you utter them or not is somewhat irrelevant. But if you follow this path to that union, then everything is already being taken care of. Everything is already within that higher power and is that higher power. So, to speak to what Larry was saying about, can we really trust anyone? Can we really not trust him? Can we really help anyone? You know, the higher power is helping everyone. It's already happening. So, I would say our most profound prayer is already answered.
Thank you. I am, even though I am going to read it. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I guess that's the recognition and the loving part. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. And I guess daily bread, I sort of caught that for a minute, because that's, I guess, everything we need.
Yeah, it kind of stands in for everything we need.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, within the context of Christianity too, bread has a very special significance as the body of Christ. So, yeah.
Does anyone have a follow-up? How do you didn't answer how you pray now.
The most profound prayer is silence, is just in the context of this prayer, for example, or in the Western tradition, is just knowing God. That's the most profound prayer. Nothing needs to be said or done. But if you keep that higher power in your awareness, that's more than enough for anything. So, occasionally I still say some words, but words are always just a formality. Yeah.
Any other follow-up questions here? I guess your explanation was just right on and perfect, Matthew.
Well, I don't know about that.
Okay, so we're going to do a couple of quotes from Lao Tzu. First one, and Dennis, I think this was your favorite, so if I remember, he who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened.
Yeah. So, one of the great things about Lao Tzu is his ability to convey practical advice and profound wisdom all in the same compact line. And, come to think of it, I think all the great teachers are like that. Just like I was saying about prayer in terms of the different layers or levels, the great teachers can be understood on many different levels. You could understand something like this as just good practical advice, like, from Shakespeare, to thine own self be true, know yourself. But you can also read into this a more profound teaching. So the basic level, I think we can all kind of intuit. But if you know others but don't know yourself, really know yourself, you might have some kind of practical or worldly wisdom, but in a lot of ways, you're still quite ignorant. And I say that in the sense that the most fundamental aspect of your experience, the self, you've ignored or overlooked. And so enlightenment, or I would say true wisdom, or wisdom with a capital W, comes from knowing the self. Yeah.
You're saying, meaning recognizing our ego.
No, that's not what I'm saying. See, that's the worldly part. That's the worldly wisdom part. There is benefit in understanding one's ego, of knowing your ego, knowing its desires and its tendencies and its triggers and its all the various conditioned aspects of the ego. Of course, there's practical benefit to knowing that ego well, so that you can keep control of it. You can not let it get out of control or get you into trouble. The ego is really good at getting people into trouble. So yeah, that's the Shakespearean, advice to know yourself, is, and of course, you could say there's deeper message to that as well. But yeah, there's practical benefit to knowing the ego. But I think the deeper, at least how I would talk about this quote in a deeper sense, is to know one's true self, which is really the same as knowing that higher power.
I just want to point out that was a brilliant setup by me to give you more opportunity to explain that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's always it's always a troublesome distinction. In all the spiritual discourse, there is so much confusion about words, and I know I've said this before, but when one says the self, yeah, it could refer to the ego, or it could refer to the supreme reality. One couldn't imagine a bigger,
continuum,
potential misunderstanding. yeah, or a bigger continuum. Yeah. So you always have to kind of look at these words and try to see what is really being said. And sometimes, like, it can be interpreted both ways. Like here, for example, knowing the ego, of course, has practical benefit, but knowing the supreme self has, that's really the enlightenment with a capital E, not, yeah.
Okay. The next one is another quote from the Tao Te Ching, and this one comes from Bruce again. And a little bit of disclosure, Matthew and I did spend one afternoon discussing this already. So he's had a little practice for tonight. One of the most astute yet challenging spiritual verses for me comes from the Tao Te Ching, the first verse. It seems to capture the challenge of duality and non-duality, emptiness and form. Can you please comment on this verse? And I will read it. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be spoken is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestation arise from the same source. The source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding.
Yeah, so let's take it kind of line by line or section by section. The Tao that cannot be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be spoken is not the eternal name. Yeah, this is a striking first line of any book. And I remember this line just sticking in my mind when I read it for the first time. And, I was in college or something. And I was just, in awe over that. Wow, what is this? The Tao. Very interesting. So this is such an important point. The truth, whether we call it the Tao or whatever we call it, is beyond words, names, and concepts. But here, of course, we have a whole book about it. So that does capture the challenge and also the mystery. So the next line, the unnameable is eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. So this eternal truth is not something particular. That's also very important. Almost everyone out of habit is looking for something particular. And somehow naming, language, and concepts lead us astray, lead us to these particular things rather than looking beyond them. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestation. So desire and concepts go hand in hand. Desire and naming depend on one another. So all these things are connected. But this final line, which actually, Bruce, when you read this to me the other day, it was striking to me that I didn't remember this line at all. I just remembered that very first line, of the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. But this line, yet mystery and manifestation arise from the same source. That's perhaps the most important line in this entire passage. The source is called darkness. Well, that's naming. See, if we call it darkness, so darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. So, this is the most important section. And it's what I would call the concluding thought that folds everything in, leaving the reader no escape other than perhaps a path for practice, sort of investigating this darkness. What is it? So, that's the only path we have left out of that, but this line, the mystery and the manifestation arise from the same source, I know because I read the questions that the form is emptiness and emptiness is form is coming up, in round, 6 or something. But this is the exact same teaching.
Yeah.
Both come from the same source. What is that source? That's the whole thing. That's the whole spiritual endeavor. What is that source? It's the source of everything, both the mystery and the manifestation, the emptiness and the form, existence and non-existence, being and non-being, and so on. So, yeah.
Somebody must have a follow-up question for this one, because I've asked in my question when we met before.
The first Lao Tzu quote was mine, submission.
Mm.
But I actually like yours better, Bruce. The last line about darkness,
Yeah,
reminds me, Matt, of, so you and I have had some email exchange, and it reminds me of encouragement you've given me to rest in emptiness. And it's evident to me that what I am is not any appearance. It's not this face I can see in the tile here in Zoom. It's not my personality. It's not the various ego hangups I have, and so on. That what I am has no content. At the same time, I recognize that there isn't the kind of seeing where I'm going, yes, I know this.
yeah.
And I keep going back to the practice of resting in this sort of empty now, and watching what just arises, all the appearances, any thought or what have you. And I'm guessing you'll say, just keep hanging out there. But I'm wondering if there's anything you might add.
Well, look, we'll get into this when we get to the emptiness is form, form is emptiness. But, the reason why emptiness is such a big teaching is we're all very well acquainted with form. In fact, we're spellbound by it. That's, all we've paid attention to our whole lives. So we don't know emptiness. We only know half the story. We only know one side of the coin. We know the manifestation, but we don't know the mystery. Right? So that's why getting to know emptiness, experiencing emptiness, is important in practice. But look at what this teaching tells us. The manifestation and the mystery arise from the same source. That source is what you're looking for, not just emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
not just an escape from form. The reason why it's important to delve into emptiness is, like I said, we're all well acquainted with form. So we need to get to know emptiness. And, that's by way of trying to find the source. When there's balance between mystery and manifestation, between emptiness and form, then that source may suddenly just become clear.
Are you saying that both form and emptiness arise from the same source?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Form and emptiness, being and non-being.
Yes. Okay.
Existence and non-existence.
Yeah.
All arise from the same source.
Yeah.
So it's not, the spiritual endeavor is not to shun the world or to mortify the body. Those are practices. Asceticism is a practice. It can be helpful on the journey, but it's not the whole thing. It's a practice meant as an aid to realization, as an aid to understanding this source. Yeah.
Thank you.
Could I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you. So emptiness is confusing to me. And so I have two questions. Can emptiness itself be sort of like a trap? Can you sort of get attached to emptiness and just sort of get stuck? And then the second question is there different types and different grades of emptiness?
Interesting questions. Yeah, one can get stuck almost anywhere. And emptiness is one people can get stuck on. For example, if you tell people all phenomena are empty, the self is empty, everything is empty, the mind is empty, and so on, people can start to fall into a kind of nihilism, or which is, I would describe as a kind of attachment to the idea of emptiness. So whenever somebody gets trapped or stuck, it's usually due to grasping hold of an idea or a concept of the emptiness or whatever it is. So they become fixated on some notion. True emptiness, we would have to suppose, is just empty. There's no concept to get stuck on. So, but yeah, people can get stuck on this idea, this notion, or fixated on a kind of nihilistic denial of phenomena. And so that's possible, I would say. And as far as there being different kinds, I would have to say no. Because again, at least not of true emptiness, because I would have to say, true emptiness, again, we would have to presume is empty. So there couldn't be any kinds or variations or form within it. It's juxtaposed to the form. It's the other side of the coin. It's a blank. So any imagined variations would be variations in form and concept and ideas and notions of emptiness. But all notions of emptiness are themselves empty. So you know. Yeah. It's a confusing topic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that in two questions. I'm going to move us on to some Buddhist questions. The first is a koan to consider. And here it is. A Zen teacher asked, "Can you hear the sound of the stream?" "Yes," said the student. And the teacher said, "Enter there."
Yeah.
How would you think about this, and how would you advise a Zen practitioner to effectively use this koan?
Wonderful. Yeah, I think I heard this one from Alan Watts. So, and as I remember it, the student and the teacher are walking in the forest for a long time in silence before the student sort of works up the courage to ask the teacher a question about Zen, you know, how to understand Zen. And yeah, can you hear the sound of the distant stream? Yes, enter there. Okay, so look, you know, on the most basic level, truth is everywhere, in all phenomena, in all experience, and in all perceptions. So again, like manifestation and mystery, emptiness and form, both are equally contain the one source. Right? If you go into anything, you will find this truth. So the teacher can point anywhere. And as the saying goes, you have to start from wherever you are. So it's natural just to point to something in the surrounding experience. But the more interesting question is, where is the sound of that distant stream? That's what I would ask. And as for how to effectively use this koan, you know, you could say, can you hear the sound of your mind trying to use this koan? And if you can, enter there. Yeah.
Wow. Anyone got comments or questions on this one?
I just want to say wow also.
Look at you, Kristen, out there. Can you hear sound of a stream behind you?
I shall be silent.
The stream of traffic, maybe.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a comment or question? All righty, we're going to move on to the question on emptiness and form. The Heart Sutra is one of the most direct and clear, yet very challenging sutras. The essential part of it is form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. Can you please talk about this portion of the Heart Sutra and any other parts of the Heart Sutra that you care to comment on?
Yeah, I have to admit this is a tough one. Because I struggled with these exact lines for years and years. And in fact, I would say my 30-some years of martial arts practice was in some way really about trying to resolve these lines about form and emptiness. So they've kind of been in the back of my mind for a long time. I think these lines are considered the essential part of this sutra because it's this fundamental clarification about form, which we're all caught up in. It's just to make very, very clear that form and emptiness are not separate. There is no duality here. They both come from the same source. So it's notable, though, that the bulk of the rest of the sutra elaborates on the scope and nature of emptiness. So that's kind of like what I was saying earlier. We're all sort of well acquainted with form. So, the teachings tend to point towards emptiness because that's what we haven't, wrestled with. And fewer still know the emptiness within form and the form within emptiness. But that's where the sutra points. This form is emptiness and emptiness is form. I think I treated it as a kind of koan. I wrestled with it. It's the essence of trying to reach some understanding of non-duality, of here's things that we take to be opposite, but it's saying they're the same. How do you make sense of that? And my favorite part of this sutra is what I called the enumeration of negatives that expounds on the sort of scope and nature of emptiness, where it says, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. And it goes on, there's no I element and so on, up to including no mind element, no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. It's a pretty exhaustive list. In other words, you might say there is nothing that could be named. And so, I think all of this is pushing us to recognize the depths of true emptiness and to experience that other side of the coin. All phenomena are empty, it says. And that's truly profound. It's a kind of impossible thought. But it's truly wonderful, really. Yeah.
Kristen, any follow-up questions? I guess you understand emptiness and form completely now.
Sorry, I couldn't get my microphone on. I think we should have a couple of hours on this topic and sit in meditation. That'd be awesome. Thank you, Matt.
Anybody else? Has anyone else ever struggled with this and trying to understand it? And I certainly have.
Yeah, I can't, having gone through what I went through wrestling with it, I can't imagine anyone seeing these statements and not puzzling over it. Yeah.
Last chance for asking for clarity here, folks.
So Matthew,
Go ahead.
would you say then emptiness is a stage before enlightenment, or is emptiness enlightenment?
I would say it's a stage before enlightenment. Yeah. Yeah, everything has to be emptied out. And then from that, enlightenment is possible.
Thanks.
Is there any particular thing within emptiness?
No, there's no eye, there's no nose, there's no ear, it's no phenomena. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'll say, go ahead, Kristen. Yeah.
What's the link between the non-existent self and emptiness? Could you talk about that a bit? Because the impossible self, lack of existence, and emptiness,
sure.
because I tend to bring those two together.
Yeah, like death and non-existence kind of. So yeah, you know, I think people conceive of those. Again, when we talk about it, we're talking about notions of emptiness, notions of non-existence, notions of ideas. We're talking about ideas. But yes, you can see how all of these ideas, non-existence, emptiness, before birth, after death, that they all have a similar other side of the coin quality to them. And so, in some sense, yes, you can lump them all together. But again, you know, they're two sides of the same coin, being and non-being, form and emptiness. This reminds me of a story Alan Watts tells in one of his lectures. He has such great stories, and they're so memorable. He said he was talking to a Zen teacher in Japan about Dogen's Shobogenzo, which is this huge volume of about Zen. And if you've ever read it or even some of it, you will recognize it as perplexing, deeply poetic and metaphorical, and difficult to make heads or tails of. Beautiful, but far out, you know? And so he was talking to this Zen teacher, and the teacher said, the Shobogenzo, oh, that's a horrible book. Terrible, terrible book. And he asked, really, why? And he said, oh, it makes everything so clear. It gives away all the secrets. So this Heart Sutra is kind of like that. It's so clear, it's impenetrable. It's very difficult to comment on. Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on and give you an easier one this time. Quote from the Dalai Lama: "The planet does not need more successful people. The planet desperately needs more peacemakers, healers, restorers, storytellers, and lovers of all kind."
Well, of course, this seems quite straightforward from a kind of worldly perspective. You know, the contrast is between kind of selfishness and selflessness. But, you know, really, I would say this only touches the surface in order to give some good worldly advice. To go deeper, you know, we would have to ask, what does success mean? What does peacemaking mean? People can interpret things in different ways, even to further their own deluded desires. Not all stories that are told, for example, are beneficial to those who hear them. And so we have to make peace and find clarity in ourselves first. So, I would say perhaps it's clear to say what is needed is truth, realization. And even deeper, we might contemplate the following. Perhaps the world is doing just fine. It is, after all, a world with up and down, day and night, good and bad. And it is these very contrasts that guide us on the path to truth. So again, it's one of those things you can understand a saying like this on many different levels.
Any follow-up questions, Gene?
No, I thought that was thought-provoking and well put.
Perfect then. All right, we're going to move on. Here is something from Ramana Maharshi.
Maharshi, yeah.
Oh, it's spelled Maharshi.
Ramana Maharshi, yeah.
Said that I would love clarity on. The self and the world cannot be seen simultaneously. And once the self is realized, then the world disappears forever.
Yeah. So this kind of saying might seem shocking to when one first encounters it, but it's quite right. So first, just understand that when Ramana speaks of the self, he is not talking about the individual ego self or the individual mind or body. So the ego self and the mind or body are really all a part of what he is calling the world. The self Ramana speaks of is one and the same with the supreme reality, with the source, what I sometimes call reality itself or consciousness itself. So what this saying points toward is that one reality. Again, there's no duality here. So once realized, everything is seen as that. As Ramana says, there is nothing but the self. So the world is experienced through duality, multiplicity, and separation. And so it cannot be seen simultaneously with this all-encompassing oneness. It's because of that separation that we don't recognize the self. And once realized, the world disappears, not only because the world is not real and only the self is real, but also because what we thought was the world is in reality nothing but the self. So in that sense, what you might have thought of as the world may not vanish, but you see it as nothing other than the self. And so that world that you believed in or imagined was something else, that's what disappears. Your idea of the world, your conception of what the world was, vanishes forever. So I hope that helps. I know these kinds of teachings are quite challenging, but the struggle is worthwhile. The main thing to understand, really, as I see it, is that what you view as subject and object are in fact the same reality. And in what you view as form and emptiness are in fact the same reality. Yeah.
Any follow-up questions on that one? And I think our first Zoom, you sort of described for us your experience of having everything outside of you become inside of you, and your whole sense of being yourself just was outside. It was something you could look at as the total self, not.
Yeah, and even that, Bruce, was just a way of talking about it, just a way of trying to describe it, that the inside was outside, the outside is inside. But really, there's no inside or outside to the situation at all. Yeah. Inside and outside are one reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there's no place one can draw a line. So yeah, as you know, as Ramana says, everything is that. Yeah.
So we're going to end with two beautiful quotes about love. And I think we'll just read them both. And then you can talk about them. Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. And between the two, my life flows. And the second one from Rumi. Subtle degrees of domination and servitude are what you know as love. But love is different. It arrives complete, just there, like the moon in the window.
So the first quote is by Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I always find his words to be extremely direct. And this is not just a quote about love, by the way, but also about wisdom. And not just about everything, but also about nothing. So our theme here of form and emptiness and form, see, it runs through all of these. And of course about the flow of life too. So to know that you are nothing is to know that you're everything. And true wisdom is all-encompassing love. All-encompassing love is true wisdom. So, you know, what can I say about it? Love is all-encompassing. That's what I would say about it. Our very existence comes from love. And to that source we'll return. It's a kind of fearless, desireless, unassailable perfection that encompasses us all and everything. Yeah. So that's what I would say about it.
Any questions about love or wisdom or everything?
Yes. Why do we care about all of this? What do we do with it in a practical sense?
Well, if it's a practical question, it requires a practical answer. So that's an answer in the context of a person's life. And, I would say, these spiritual lodestars, such as love, wisdom, truth, are like happiness, are guides even to our practical life. So the practical answer to that question is do that which leads you to love, happiness, truth, and wisdom on whatever level. So that can mean different things in the context of different people's lives. But that's why I say, you can look to those things and those kinds of teachings as a kind of guiding light. Yeah.
Thank you.
And you could follow that from beginning all the way to the end. Just as I said about prayer, it's the same progression. All from acknowledging that there's that higher principle, love or truth, and then trusting, then loving, then union. Yeah. So you can follow that all the way to the end. It can be a mixed up, crazy road that we're on. So, it's good to have a few stars to orient yourself by. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Does anybody else have a question about anything or thoughts or final something you want to say?
I do.
Good.
So, Matt, it's really difficult, it's really difficult for me to ask a question because any question that I ask is going to come from my mind. And any answer that I'm going to be given is just going to feed the delusion of my ego construct. Yet, at the same time, I cannot not ask it. Thank you.
It's the conundrum that we're in,
Yeah. So this question is not a question of paradox, because I've spent a lot of time in silence. I spent a lot of time with that paradox of duality and non-duality. That's why I loved your book. I absolutely love, and the insights really good. So this is not a question of paradox, but a question my mind wants to ask you about spiritual cosmology. Okay, I don't know. So I have a sense, this consciousness that I'm speaking to you with, at the same time, I do have a sense of an observer of my consciousness. And this observer is observing the thoughts. Right now, I have a lot of physical pain, which is different than thoughts. So my question is, this observer, this watcher, in Western terms, or in New Age terms, whatever you want to call it, is it this observer, is it my higher self? Is it my soul? Is it some other aspect of source?
A difficult question. This is a practical question too, really.
Yeah.
What's beyond that observer?
I'm lucky when I can get to the observer.
Yeah.
I assume source creation.
Yeah. I would say the true source is beyond even the observer. It's kind of, this is sometimes referred to as kind of witness consciousness, as opposed to individual ego consciousness. But there's a kind of consciousness, I would say even beyond that, which is the source, which, I say consciousness itself, but that's just a term too. Even consciousness is an idea.
Sure.
But so if you're experiencing pain, physical pain,
yeah,
getting to know this witness consciousness can be very helpful, because it's the ego consciousness that suffers from the pain. And the witness just sees it as phenomena. So, in my book, I write about processing pain. And it's good practical practice, because it's very useful, because, at one point or another, almost, I think, everybody who has a body is going to have to deal with pain. So, my advice for that is, first to just make sure you can breathe. It's very important. It sounds very simple, but people often, when they're in pain, they don't want to do it. But if you inhale through your nose, exhale out your mouth, and just focus on the breathing, this alone, especially if the pain is really acute, can help calm your nervous system, calm yourself down. Once you have calmed yourself down a little bit, then the next step is just kind of accepting the pain. It's what's happening. And we may not want it to happen, but the fact is, it is happening. If it's already happening. So much of our resistance to pain comes about through a desire for it not to be happening. And that desire for it not to be happening increases our suffering. And so just working on accepting that the pain is there, that it is happening, can be very helpful. It can be overwhelming, so you don't have to do it all at once. But if you can, bit by bit, just make friends with your pain. And the final kind of element to this practice is to look directly at it and to see it for what it is. It's pure sensation. That's all. To the witnessing consciousness, it's just phenomena. And when you see it this way, you can experience enormous relief. And in fact, you can experience your pain almost as a kind of bliss.
Okay.
But, like I said, you don't have to do it all at once.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I know. Well, that was a lovely answer. Thank you.
Next Zoom meeting, you can tell us that you're pain free. It's all just a phenomena floating down the stream.
I don't promise you will be pain free. I just say it's a practice that will help manage pain and stress,
Yeah. No.
Wait, I thought you were promising bliss. Wait.
Thank you,
I gotta go. I gotta go.
Well, I'm going to start summing this up. We've got about 10 minutes left. First, thank you, Matthew. You did a good job tonight, my friend.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you everyone for coming and for your quotes and questions. Yeah, much appreciated.
How did this go for people tonight? Matthew and I are always open to ideas to make it better next time. Did it go pretty well for people?
I thought so.
Good. Good. I see the people on my screen are nodding their heads. Good. I think Matthew and I, Matthew and I will talk, and then we'll figure out a idea for our next Zoom, and I will send it out, and maybe again invite your ideas or questions or whatever theme or topic we come up with.
So I did like Kristen's suggestion. Maybe we do a little meditation together. That sounded really sweet to me.
Yeah.
A thought I have, and this was occurring to me as I was hearing the questions about practicalities arise. So you go through your day or you go through your week, and you have a conversation maybe with a family member or a friend or just somebody in town, and you find yourself emotionally triggered by it. And as much as the person or the personality or appearances, and we want to get to know the form less as, well as we've known the form our whole life, we've all been subject to conditioning.
Yeah.
And there's this shadow that we all have that follows around and contributes to how we're triggered or not in various situations. I guess I'm wondering if you see opportunities for practice in those kinds of moments.
Yes.
Are there ways to work with our conditioning, if you will?
Yes. Yeah.
That can further the practice. And at least in the sessions I've attended, I don't recall us talking about that. So
yeah,
some kind of discussion along those lines would be, just speaking for myself, very helpful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. This is similar to the pain question. It's just
right.
a different area of experience and phenomena.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so really the practice is the same. So the most important thing, of course, if you're triggered or, get angry or emotional or, the first thing to do is to breathe, focus on your breathing. It's just a different kind of stress. And so, you have to breathe. You have to accept what's happening and look clearly at yourself and see that all the phenomena, the thoughts that cascade out of the experience, the fears, the whole cascade of thoughts and emotions that come out of the experience are themselves phenomena that are impermanent. So you have to be able to hold them within yourself and allow those things to pass through you, pass away. You know, like when you meditate and watch your thoughts, for example, they arise and they go along their course, and maybe they kick off other thoughts and there's a whole train of thoughts or whatever, but they're all like clouds passing. So you just watch and watch the course that it takes. And you will see that these states, whatever the states, they will arise, and everything that arises will subside. Everything is like that, you know. Even the waking world is like that, you know. At some point tonight, we'll go to sleep and all of this will fall away. So yeah, there's opportunities for practice in everything. Yeah. All of life, you could say, is one big opportunity for practice. Yeah.